tells us that there will be 2 witnesses that God will send, and they will be slain in Jerusalem, and the whole world will see their bodies lying in the streets of Jerusalem. This again would have been an impossibility if we had not had the worldwide communication systems through satellites, where an event can happen in Jerusalem and we can be sitting in our living rooms and watching that event take place. And yet, the prophecy, as far-fetched as it seemed, is now a very practical reality.
In the 11th chapter of the book of Revelations, the Bible speaks of 2 witnesses that will be killed, and every people, tribe, language, and nation will gaze on their bodies and refuse them burial. Keep in mind that this text was written in AD 95, yet foreshadows a time such as today, as nearly everyone in modern culture has a TV, and many even get live TV on their cell phones.
Jesus gave his disciples a confidential briefing on his second coming, which is recorded in Matthew 24. And in that briefing he pointed out that there would come great tribulation such as the world had not seen to that time nor ever would see again. In fact, he said, unless those days be shortened, there would no flesh be saved. It's interesting, the technology to make good that prediction didn't exist until our day. If you talked in these terms in the period of the Roman Empire, or if you talked in these terms, say, even in the time of the Civil War, the technology to wipe out the entire world just wasn't a realistic projection. And yet today, our technology has caught up to those prophecies. Every political leader on the planet Earth makes his decisions under the cloud of the possibility of triggering a global nuclear war that could indeed destroy all flesh on the planet Earth.
This is Zechariah 14:12, written 2,500 years ago by the prophet Zechariah. Quote, their flesh shall dissolve while they stand on their feet, their eyes shall dissolve in their sockets, and their tongues shall dissolve in their mouths. Unquote. I mean, what is he talking about? You couldn't have imagined it 2,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago. This has got to be nuclear weapons. This is exactly what nuclear weapons do. You know what's happening in the Middle East. A nuclear exchange will begin in the Middle East. This is exactly what Zechariah 14:12 is talking about. I don't think you can doubt it.
When I had an inside briefing at NATO headquarters in Brussels, our ambassador to NATO and our assistant secretary of defense for NATO admitted they believe a nuclear event in the Middle East is a certainty. It's just a matter of time.
The prophecy that most intrigues me in the Bible is Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, what Bible scholars call the war of Gog and Magog. Gog, we find out, is not a personal name. It's a title, like a pharaoh or a czar. Now, he is the leader over a territory called Magog. The Magogites, the people of Magog, are the people whom the Greeks called Scythians. These are the people group who settled north of the Black and Caspian Seas in what we now call Russia and the former Soviet republics. So what we're talking about with Gog is a Russian dictator, someone who's going to oversee Russia as they begin to form an alliance with Iran and a group of other Middle Eastern countries to attack Israel, to try to destroy or annihilate Israel in the last days.
Then you have the Persia. Well, in 1930 is when they changed the name to Iran. It had been Persia up until that time.
Ezekiel 38 and 39 tells us of a future invasion of Israel by a vast coalition of nations that surround it. This invasion is led by Russia and Iran, but includes other nations such as Turkey, Syria, Libya, and Sudan. What is interesting is in the 2,500 years that this prophecy has existed, never has there been a military alliance between Russia and Iran. Iran's president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, has sworn to wipe Israel off the map. Several multi-billion-dollar arms deals between Russia and Iran have occurred, and Russia is building nuclear power plants and supplying Iran with long-range missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads.
The Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad getting a powerful new ally in a standoff for the West. Russia's President Vladimir Putin is now backing Iran's right to nuclear power and warning the rest of the world not to use military action against Iran.
Israel, in Ahmadinejad's view, is the little Satan. The United States is considered the great Satan. We are both in the crosshairs of radical Islam.
The greatest danger that the world faces is the arming of Iran with nuclear weapons.
What makes it so serious is that there is non-conventional weapons in the hands of non-conventional government.
It is clear that Iran is looking far beyond Israel and far beyond Tel Aviv. Their aim is the West as a whole.
They want to concentrate on completing their nuclear program, because once they have that, then they could threaten the West in ways that are unimaginable today. They could take over the Persian Gulf on all its sides and take control of the oil reserves of the world, most of them. They could topple Saudi Arabia and Jordan in short order. And of course Iraq. The internal debates in America on Iraq would be irrelevant, because a nuclear-armed Iran would subordinate Iraq in 2 seconds.
The Russian interest, to my mind, is first of all to become back a player in the superpower games, to become superpower. And as long as they don't have positive assets to play with, they use negative assets to challenge the United States.
This is the nightmare scenario, that the most radical Islamic extremist regime, that is already the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, that is now fully entrenched in the most violent way in Iraq, killing thousands of innocent people, that has called for wiping Israel off the map, that an end to the United States, that has this global Islamic rule agenda and believes in the end of the world, would now get the nuclear bomb.
You think that these people are normal. You think that Iran would conform to the conceptions of deterrence and careful calculation of cost and benefit. But in fact, it is part of that stream of radical Islam, in this case Shiite stream. But you've already seen what the Sunni stream does, which is to smash into buildings in Manhattan with collective suicide, to smash into the Pentagon with collective suicide. And there's no reason to believe that the militant Shiites, once they have atomic weapons, will not be suicidal.
This is a threat for all the free world, not for the one another candidate, not for one another country, but for all the free world to remain free.
Back in 1998, the U.S. Congress, both the Democrats and the Republicans, put together a commission analyzing the vulnerability of the United States to ballistic missile attack from third world countries. This commission, which received material from American intelligence sources, concluded that the Iranians could build an intercontinental range missile that could strike the eastern seaboard of the United States within 5 years of taking the decision of doing so. And it wouldn't be clear to American intelligence and military leaders that in fact the Iranians had taken that decision.
The confrontation with this regime is inevitable, and is going to be a military one rather than a political one, because of the lack of determination when it comes to the international community to deal with it by political or economic means.
Take strong action against Iran, first in the form of sanctions, and second, if those don't work, using other means, is something that would be criticized, perhaps severely criticized. By the way, less so in the Arab and Muslim world. They just want it to happen, and they're begging it to happen. But in the sort of polite, politically correct opinion salons that never get it right in the West, you'd be criticized, but you'd be saving the world, and probably saving millions and millions of lives.
In the book of Zechariah, chapter 12, Zechariah predicts that Jerusalem will be made a cup of trembling to all the nations of the world.
And God said, I'll make them a cup of trembling. And this is the number one problem that the United Nations faces today. Everybody knows it. The United Nations has spent 1/3 of its time in deliberations and pronouncements about Jerusalem and Israel. This little land that has 1/1000th of the world's population. They spent 1/3 of their time on it.
Zechariah chapter 12, God said, I'm going to make Jerusalem a cup of trembling. You couldn't believe that. 2,500 years ago, Jerusalem lay in ruins, surrounded by wilderness. And God said, let me tell you something. The day is coming when a world of 5.75 billion people will have their eyes on Jerusalem in fear and trembling, knowing that the next world war, when it breaks out, is going to break out over that city. And it's a little nothing place. You can't explain it logically, rationally.
When you look at Israel, Jerusalem, and the Temple Mount through the third lens of Bible prophecy and the scriptures, you understand that because God chose this city, this country, and the Temple Mount for his own, the enemy, whom the Bible calls Satan, has chosen it as well.
But it's anti-Semitism is horrible. Visit Auschwitz. Do you know that after Auschwitz, after those skeletal survivors of Auschwitz were released, 1,500 of them were killed by the Poles when they went back to try to reclaim the homes from which the Gestapo had taken them to exterminate them. That's after the Holocaust.
6 million perished at the hands of the Nazis.
The year was 1967. Israel fighting for its survival against combined Arab forces.
PLO has been unable to stop radical Palestinians from attacking and killing Israelis.
Anti-Semitism continues to this day. God foretold it, but he said, 1,000 Hitlers can't wipe you out. I'm going to preserve you as an identifiable ethnic national group of people because in the last days I'm going to bring you back into your land.
The Lord had promised the Jews that if they would turn from him, he would turn from them, and they would be dispersed throughout all the world. This, we know, took place. But the amazing, miraculous thing is that though they went for almost 2,000 years without a homeland, yet they maintained their national identity. This is something that is totally unparalleled in man's history. No other nation has been able to maintain their national identity for more than 300 years without a homeland.
God not only preserved the national identity of the Jews, but he promised that in the last days he would regather them back into their homeland. In Ezekiel chapter 37 we read, "Thus says the Lord God, Surely I will take the children of Israel from among the nations, wherever they have gone, and will gather them from every side, and bring them into their own land, and I will make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel." Amazingly, this generation has watched the fulfillment of this prophecy.
There are just so many prophecies about the last days that nobody could have dreamed of. And one of them, in Revelation 13, it says this false prophet will come along, the second man, the assistant to the Antichrist, who backs him and who does miracles and so forth. And one of the things that he does, he sets up an image to the beast. And he makes this image talk. Again, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, you couldn't have dreamed how that might happen. But today we have a whole science of robotics that is developing so rapidly. I mean, I've talked with some of these people, and it's mind-boggling what they're able to do. But to even dream this up 2,000 years ago, no, that's prophecy. We're seeing it fulfilled. This was God inspiring men to write these things.
In Revelation chapter 13, verse 15, we read, "He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed." It is this generation that has witnessed the birth of human-like robots, bionics, and genetic engineering. Many religions already worship images, and Hollywood has paved the way for our acceptance of human-like machines.
Daniel 12:4 speaks of an explosion of knowledge in the last days. With the internet and the click of a button, we have the opportunity to learn at a rate unparalleled by any other generation. This verse also states that there will be an increase in transportation. It's remarkable to review the achievements in travel technology, considering 115 years ago, horseback was the fastest mode of transportation. The SR-71 Blackbird holds the current record speed